Happy Friday, fellow patriots. There's about 90 days left in the 2024 election. I'm recording this episode before Joe Biden gets his next national security briefing and Kamala sends jackbooted thugs to steal our guns. The caffeine is coursing through my veins, and I've got a week's worth of news to break down. I'm going to try to do it in 30 minutes or less, but if not, too bad. This is Rally for the Republic. I'm your host, Bryan Rudnick. Mrs. DEI and Mr. Rogers are now the choice for a new generation of Democrat voters. Team Obama is running their operation. And now you, the American people, have a choice, because the pendulum might be swinging back. Liberty-loving and other sane Americans have booted 2 squad members this summer. Yippee! But the left got a victory, too. They kept the Jew off the ticket. So you've got to be asking yourself, what's going to happen here in Act 2? People are wondering, Donald Trump agreed to debate on ABC next month? I thought he wasn't doing that. And when, if ever, is Kamala going to sit down and be brave enough to have a journalist interview her one-on-one? I promised to talk about Tampon Tim, our Manchurian VP candidate, and all the folly that's been dished out to the American people this week. But first, a break.
This is a battle cry for the American way of life and a relentless pursuit of truth and justice. It comes from a voice with unmatched experience and unyielding resolve. Join us as we dissect current events and tip the scales in your favor. This is Rally for the Republic with your host, Bryan Rudnick.
Bryan Rudnick, Rally for the Republic, here in the free state of Florida, where we will readily and easily thwart any attempt by cackling Kamala and her coach, the groomer, Tim Walz, as they attempt to turn this state and our nation blue. The left even put out polls saying she could take Florida and places like Miami-Dade County. It ain't going to happen on my watch. But first, let's talk about what happened in Missouri's 1st congressional district the other day. Cori Bush, we booted her. Good riddance. But if you're not aware, AIPAC and others spent millions to kick that BLM-loving, anti-American, Israel-hating squad member out of Congress. But she didn't go silently into that good night. She took a parting shot, and her quote was, "AIPAC, I'm coming to tear your kingdom down." Somehow, this woman, who seeks to destroy Israel and hang out in support of Hamas and Hezbollah, has turned to the Bible. Apparently, that's some sort of biblical reference. Okay, which is kind of funny, considering she skipped right over Genesis 12:3, probably because she's the one who got cursed. I'm going to take a break once again, and then I'm going to dig into this further.
You are listening to Rally for the Republic with your host, Bryan Rudnick.
Bryan Rudnick, Rally for the Republic. As I was saying, AIPAC did some good work now that they're starting to act like the Republican Jewish Coalition and Zionist Organization for America. They put some money into defeating anti-Semites like Cori Bush this week and Jabal Bowman earlier in the summer. AIPAC's finally doing something right for the Jewish community. And it's nice to see, because we've got real problems with Kamala and Tampon Tim. I want to welcome AIPAC and its supporters to the community of right-leaning, freedom-loving Americans who don't just stand up for the American way of life, but stand up for Israel by ensuring never again has real meaning. And it's not just about supporting the state of Israel Jewish candidates. It's also about standing up to the anti-Semites in the Democrat Party. It's about ensuring Jews have support in America and they support our constitutional rights, like our Second Amendment rights, because the best way to protect your life and liberty in pursuit of happiness is by also having a gun so we don't relive the 1930s. That's right, you heard me say it. Get a gun. If you're Jewish, get 12, get 24, have them in every room. Keep them on your body. Make sure never again has meaning. Okay? No more silent minority. No more appeasement of the Democrat Party. No more playing nice with those who coddle terrorists. We cannot afford to relive the 1930s. I'm personally working to make sure of that. Because you got to understand, the Democratic Party had this cloud over it, okay? First, the squad members, they came on the scene a couple of years ago. They won in 2018, big blah, 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 whatever. And then Ilhan Omar opens her mouth, and Rashida Tlaib in the night of winning was calling for Palestinian statehood. And Ilhan Omar's attacking Israel and the Jews with their Benjamins comments, and nobody wanted to do anything about it. Then Ilhan Omar gives a speech in front of CARE, a terrorist organization, at their LA chapter, and she makes a reference about 9/11, that some people did something. That's all the way she characterized it, okay? She doesn't care that her Muslim terrorists loving people have decided to kill Americans. No. And Rashida Tlaib and her, they just continue to make these pro-Palestinian, anti-American comments. They took pictures alongside Hezbollah terrorists. And then you're looking at these Democrats, Jewish Democrats, any Democrat, Nancy Pelosi, and you're going, hey, what are you doing to shut this down? What are you doing to throw them out, disavow, anything? They tried to kill the censor vote. Republicans tried to throw Ilhan Omar off the Foreign Affairs Committee. Democrats stood in the way. These squad members have never minced words, and they've doubled down on the anti-American, anti-Israel hate, and they've inflamed this base of people who are anti-Semitic and anti-Israel. Okay? And that's because the Democratic Party, from Joe Biden to Kamala Harris, Nancy Pelosi, even the most powerful Jew in the country, Chuck Schumer, has kowtowed to these people and been way too silent. A couple of years ago, when all this started breaking out, you had Debbie Wasserman Schultz of Florida, South Florida, Southwest, whatever, Fort Lauderdale West area in Broward County. Okay. And she once described Ilhan Omar. It was that show on Showtime with the idiots and rhinos who ran that show. And she described Debbie Wasserman Schultz as like your crazy uncle at Thanksgiving. Weird comment to make for the lady who basically said she wants to kill you. And Debbie Wasserman Schultz is treating her like she's her family member. Sorry, your family member shouldn't want to kill you. So that was the excuse. They kept Omar in the party. They kept AOC. They kept Rashida Tlaib. And then they eventually got Cori Bush. Cori Bush, who was a BLM leader, who hates Jews, hates Americans, hates white people. And yet they're keeping her in and doing nothing. And finally, these people, because of October 7th, they woke up. Because the anti-Semitism got even worse. It did. I was in New England this summer. I met people. They're Jewish. They didn't know who I was. They didn't know what I did yet. They happen to be friends of some relatives, and they start talking to me. And even they admitted, if it hadn't been for October 7th, they and some of their friends would still be voting Democrat. But now they're waking up, and that's probably why AIPAC got the money they did. And really what AIPAC needs to do is just recognize what's gone on here, the shift in this country, and stop doling out money to the Democrats until they all get a backbone, right? We don't just want appeasement of Kamala, who, by the way, met with these pro-Palestinian activists in Detroit and promised an embargo on Israel. Now she's backtracking. No, put pressure on these people. They want to backtrack, say, oh, we always love Israel. Look, she's married to the self-hating Jewish guy. No, stop the excuses. Drain their finances. Do not support the Democratic Party with votes or money until they kick out the anti-Semites. I'm tired of hearing them claim Trump and Marjorie Taylor Greene and Josh Hawley and other great patriots are anti-Israel and anti-Semitic when these people have done more for Israel than anybody in the Democrat Party. Yeah, that's the truth. You may not like sometimes what they say, that may be rough around the edges, but their support for Israel and the Republican Party has been so much stronger than what we've ever seen from the Democrats. Yet these Democrats just want to hug and embrace, and these AIPAC-loving idiots want to hug and embrace the squad. These people need to get on board, realize Donald Trump's got the record. When he was president, he demonstrated, he proved it. He's got the record. So you've got to get on board. Because I want to remind you, 2008, for those of you who haven't looked me up, you haven't Googled me, I was held responsible, thrown under the bus for a letter that went out on behalf of some prominent Jewish leaders in Pennsylvania. And the letter talked about the dangers of electing Barack Obama and his support for Iran and how it would lead to a Holocaust. And this became a huge brouhaha, international news story. I was blamed for the letter. Yes, I wrote the letter. Happy to admit it now. Admitted it a couple years ago after the election was over, and I was asked about it. I wrote the letter. My company distributed the letter. My company helped do the targeted distribution to Jewish voters to put out the clarion call, hoping to wake people up before Barack Obama delivered pallets of cash to Tehran airfields. Because I've been proven right, and everybody who was with me on that committee who put out that letter and signed their name to it has been proven right. Barack Obama, who's now leading the Democratic Party once again with Kamala as his puppet, and you see them embracing Tehran, you see them embracing the squad, you see them embracing anti-Semitism. It was a clarion call in 2008, and it took this long for the Jewish community to wake up. Well, the rest of them better wake up. And if you're listening to the Rally for the Republic, hopefully you're going to gain some information I hope to impart from you, and you'll do additional research to tell your friends and family why they need to wake up. Okay? These are the people that kicked Josh Shapiro off the ticket for one reason only. They come up with every cockamamie story they want. We all know the progressive squad, the squad lovers, they pushed to get rid of Shapiro. Okay, and John Fetterman tried to say, oh, he's got ambition. Tell me a person in politics who doesn't have ambition. You're all a bunch of narcissists. That's why you put your name on a ballot. That's why you love the rallies. That's why AOC jumps around on stage with her rap songs. Give me a break. And Kamala brings those girls on stage, those rap stars, to use their profanity and shake their booties and do whatever it takes to get her elected, to distract, okay? To distract from her ambition and narcissism. While she sits there and hugs and embraces anti-Semites and promises embargoes against Israel for arms and tries to promote a so-called ceasefire while Jewish lives are on the line. But that's what the Democratic Party's all about. No backbone, no love for Israel, no love for America. They just want to bring out Tampon Tim and tell you he's going to be America's great new uncle. But here's where we're at, okay? Kamala made the call. She brought Tampon Tim onto the ticket, and now all the Democrats fell in line. They're all in love again. They're all unified. They're all in support. They don't know what that anti-Semitism was earlier in the week. Nobody believes it anymore. Mind you, there were Jewish Democrats, Jared Moskowitz, others. They were questioning whether there was anti-Semitism. Now they've all fallen in line with Tampon Tim as the choice, and they're back to loving themselves, hating America, and apologizing for their, basically apologizing to Hamas and Hezbollah and to Iran for not, staying in line, I guess. So the people who want to kill Jews, Christians, abolish Israel, abolish the United States, abolish anybody else who's our allies. I mean, heck, we saw Iran and their proxies even kill Druze people in Israel earlier this week. Yet, doesn't matter. They'll kill kids, grandmas, whatever. And the Democrats are still on board with ceasefire and embracing the squad. Okay? And Kamala just backtracks every time she gets caught, and the media is going to let that happen. And I did the research, all this week as I prepped for this episode, and I apologize. I've been so busy running campaigns around the country, and I've got primary elections coming up, so I apologize. I haven't had the chance to drop an episode, and over the next 2 weeks, it's going to get a little difficult, but I'll do the best I can. I did a lot of research, collected a lot of articles, watched a lot of videos so that I could opine here to you with truth, justice, and, of course, the American way. And everything that's happening in Kamala world, Trump said it's a honeymoon. He's partly right. I'm going to get onto that in a moment. It's all coming down, and it's all going to be exposed. I saw a lot of reputable media organizations, even liberal ones, and they promoted that story of Kamala and her embargo statement. Okay, this wasn't just made up by Team Trump. So, my fellow patriots, you got a choice here. You've got to get into the facts. You've got to do the research. You've got to educate, because the left is using a calculus that, quite frankly, we apparently cannot understand, or we're too blind to notice. I don't think we are. I'm just saying that's their perception, because they've decided to go with the Manchurian candidate, paired her up with one of the most radically socialist people they could find, and we've got the choice to make America great again. You're really going to be thinking about this. Are we going to elect a groomer? You heard me say it before. I'm going to keep saying it. Tim Walz is a groomer who preys on children. He's not just the Manchurian candidate, but that's who we might have as a vice president. Or do we make America great again with somebody like J.D. Vance, who may not be perfect, but he embodies the American dream and the American spirit? And Donald Trump may not be perfect, because after all, he's a human being made in the eyes of God. But Donald Trump said it best this week. He said, when referencing Kamala and Tim Walz, this is a ticket that would want this country to go communist immediately, if not sooner. And he's right. Look at what Tim Walz's record is on China. The trips he took, the wedding, the honeymoon, the teaching, the hanging out there. I think I saw some stat that it was like 30 trips to China. That tells you a lot. A lot. And you should be scared. And we're going to talk about that more after the break.
You are listening to Rally for the Republic with your host, Bryan Rudnick.
Bryan Rudnick here in the Rally for the Republic headquarters. As I mentioned, I'm spending a lot of time right now moving pieces around the chessboard, helping candidates to get elected nationally at various congressional districts, so forth, working with some super PACs. I also am doing a lot of work to still help friends in Israel who are raising money to support soldiers, to support civilian security forces in Israel. In fact, I'm going to have one of those folks on as a guest possibly next week. Waiting for confirmation. But let's get deeper into the events of the week and remind my great patriotic listeners here at Rally for the Republic. Something very important. I always say it. I'm going to continue to advocate. You've got to get involved. You've got to get involved in the process. You've got to remain engaged. The way Kamala and Tampon Tim win is if you become apathetic and you let your friends and family and loved ones become apathetic. So don't, because I'm going to do my best to continue to publish episodes throughout this election cycle to give you the lowdown, to give you the skinny, to give you tachlis, brass tacks, the facts you need when you want to fill up that notepad of things to help educate fellow Americans about how we save this country. See, most of the media and the voters, they're focused, and activists, you're all focused on the White House. That's all you could hear about this week in the news, right? And as we're going, we get into next week, and then the week after is the Democratic convention. And you've got to stay focused on down-ballot candidates, because God willing, Donald Trump is going to win in November. You heard me say it. God willing, Donald Trump wins in November. And you have to say, okay, great, we save America. No, it doesn't work like that. Donald Trump wins. If God is good and he delivers, and God's always good, so he's going to deliver us Donald Trump, right? But in order to be effective, Donald Trump must have a majority in both houses of Congress. So we've got to get people locally elected, state legislatures, statewide, and especially the United States Congress and Senate. So I'm going to give you some thoughts here. I have a candidate who's running in a district that covers Boca Raton, Florida. Parts of Broward County includes areas like Parkland that unfortunately was known for the school shooting in 2018. It also covers Fort Lauderdale, known for where the boys are, if you're old enough to remember that. And there's lots of candidates in this primary, in the Republican primary, just like there are in races around the country. We had one in the Nevada Senate race where I worked. We've had one in races California where I worked, stuff in Texas, all over the place. And there's lots of candidates in this race, and you always see in consultants, we talk about how to formulate messages and narratives in these races. How do you take candidates in a race and overcome the challenge in a primary to get the donors, to get the voter support, to get the media coverage? There's lots of challenges. We have to frame a race, okay? This is how consultants think about each and every race that we're involved in. And we're seeing a trend. My colleagues and I talk about that, especially in the primaries, less people are willing to get involved since COVID. They don't want to do the traditional grassroots stuff. Campaigns are becoming a little bit more difficult to manage. People talk about campaigns being more expensive. Part of that is the lack of volunteer support. So they've got to count on mail and media to make up the difference in a lot of races. This is not specific to the race I just mentioned. This is actually specific to every race I've witnessed in the country. Whether or not I'm a part of it, this is happening. My colleagues also say the same thing. Makes it very difficult on candidates. But what you see is a bunch of candidates, and the Democrats have these problems too, believe it or not. And you see these candidates, Republican candidates, great people. They're willing to volunteer. They're putting themselves up. Some of them, it's because they're narcissistic. Some of them, like my race in Florida, you've got candidates who need a job. They've never held a job, so they run for Congress 7 times. They run for other seats like 10 other times. Somebody I know in this race, I've known since I'm 19, has never won an election that I'm aware of, has been running since I was 19 years old, that individual, and continues to be a perennial loser. Forget candidate. He's a perennial loser. And then there's other people, they're stroking their egos, or I've watched candidates and they're trying to boost their insurance business, whether they're running for state legislature or Congress, and they're not running to win. And then what they're doing is they're siphoning off donors and they're siphoning off support that could go to a candidate who can actually win the general election. It's something you have to be really careful about. And they'll claim to be the biggest MAGA candidate and best candidate. And oh my God, they're with Trump. And I have one guy, we call him the Chat GBT candidate because he just sounds like Chat GBT. All he can say is, I love Donald Trump. I support Donald Trump, MAGA movement, this, that, and the other. Well, guess what? Some of these seats, and this is a very big phenomenon I've witnessed the last couple of years, especially in the Trump era. Again, I'm a supporter of Donald Trump, but I'm also a professional political consultant who has to handicap races, who has to build a narrative, who has to get candidates across the finish line. Okay, so I have to look at these races. Not every race is Kansas 1, where there's more cows than people, or Alabama 2, or South Carolina 1 that I used to work in a lot that covered Myrtle Beach and the coast and what they used to call the... Anyway, so the low country, that's what I was thinking. They used to call it the low country area. I think it's shifted a little bit, and I believe that may be where Nancy Mace is now. But prior to her, I worked there. And you've got these candidates in these bifurcated primaries, and they all want to rush to the right and rush to MAGA. But the district doesn't always look like that. And I'm not saying you disavow Donald Trump, God forbid, and you don't disavow the MAGA movement, but you actually need candidates who can win a general election, which means they need to match what the issues of importance are to the district, to the people in that district, and only in that district. And they also at times need to match the demographics. Okay, like we saw Kim Klacik running for that Baltimore seat. Okay, that she was famous for that ad walking through Baltimore because she looked like the district. She sounded like the district. She grew up in the district. It makes a difference. It really does. And you can tell the difference when candidates run, whether or not they really know the district. Versus this race I have in South Florida, where two candidates literally drove 30 minutes north to get into a new congressional race because they continuously, over the course of almost 10 years, lost a race to the South. So very important when you're looking at supporting candidates, and please go beyond the White House, support candidates for U.S. Senate, support candidates for Congress, get involved. Because if you want Donald Trump to be effective, you've got to elect good members of Congress, and you've got to support a candidate. They don't have to be perfect. Okay, but they've got to be honest and genuine with the voters. They've got to represent. Most importantly, they've got to have a pathway to victory in the general election. That means after the primary. That means after everybody's decided who's more Donald Trump, who's more Reagan, and so forth. You've got to win a primary, but you've got to win the general election, which means you've got to appeal to the non-party affiliated voters, whatever they are in your state. Sometimes they're called independent, sometimes they're Green Party. And then there's Democrats. Okay. And you've got to, and if you're in California, they've got the American Independent Party, and other states, you've got other parties, but you've got people who aren't just Republicans, and you've got to win them over in most seats in most districts in order to win. Not every seat is going to be majority red. Okay. We do have purple districts in this country. So you've got to think about an actual strategy to win the general election. And you've got to find a candidate who represents most of your views and can win. And you've got to take the blinders off. That's the most important. That's really, I guess, the point of the story, what I'm trying to get to, or the point of the lesson. Because I remember a discussion sitting with Ed Koch, who was a Democrat and mayor of New York City. And also, you could say all sorts of things about him. And I didn't agree with him on everything, but I went to listen to him lecture in college. And I remember sitting with him privately with a few other people to talk about politics. And he said he would tell people if they were making a decision about how to vote, and he would say, if you agree with me on 8 out of 12 issues, you should probably vote for me. And if you agree with me on 12 out of 12 issues, you're probably crazier than me. That was the story he gave. Okay. Reminder, no perfect candidate exists, not even Donald Trump, who we love, and God willing will be president of the United States. But we've got to support the right candidates, because the effect of supporting the wrong candidates is not just on destroying our country or not saving the country, but will literally end up with the Republican version of Kamala Harris and Tim Walz. Okay, so they'll be registered Republicans, and they're going to waste donor money and waste activist money and so forth and volunteers, and will lose opportunities to win that individual seat, and then resources that maybe could go to the seat to the left, the seat to the right, north, south, whatever it is. Those people don't win either. because we diverted resources in the wrong places. And in an election year like 2024, where yes, we've got to take back the White House, we've got to take back Congress, we cannot afford to divert resources to the wrong people. So it's very important that you think about that. You get beyond the emotion of knowing a candidate. You get beyond the emotion of, well, this is the most MAGA candidate. Or you get beyond the emotion of it's the most pro-life candidate, because you've got to win. Losers don't legislate. I cannot reiterate that enough. Losers don't legislate. So in order for me to speed this up, and it looks like I'm going to break past that 30-minute line, I'm going to talk to you about some things I noticed this week. I've been rewatching speeches, rallies, Kamala Harris, Tim Walz, all those fancy socialists that you're seeing in the media right now. And I teach candidates, when I get hired to do consulting, a lot of times I do media training, policy training, speech training, and body language becomes an important part of that. You don't want a candidate standing up there with their hands by their side. They're standing at attention. They're in the military. It doesn't work. And if you watch Donald Trump, and a lot of people talk about, his hands are moving backwards, forward, sideways, in and out. But there's body language. And he's trying to explain himself. And there's always motion with how he speaks. Or, hey, it's a fist in the air. I'm fighting for you. Fight, fight, fight. There's body language that makes the difference. Okay? So Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, they're on stage, and I picked up on some signs, and I think these signs are very important because it goes to explaining who these people are, and most importantly, how we are going to defeat them this year. See, Harris, she starts talking. You'll notice sometimes she wants to pretend to be Southern. Sometimes she wants to act like a Yankee. Sometimes she wants to act black. Sometimes she's just whatever. But she, at the speech announcing Tim Walz the other day, she went through some of those mechanics. And then I started watching her facial expression very deeply and a weird way in which she moves her jaw. And then all of a sudden it dawned on me. That's just like Nancy Pelosi. When Nancy got caught and blindsided by the media at various times over the last couple of years on issues, whether it's dealing with the COVID situation and she got caught breaking the rules, whether it's how pissed off she was at the squad, Donald Trump, Joe Biden, you'll see there's something weird that happens with her jaw and the way she tries to get snarky and snaps back at reporters. Kamala was doing that on a stage where she should have been joyous. Okay? You know, Tim Walz thanked her for bringing back the joy. But if you look at her jaw and the way she moved and her body language, this actually was not a happy woman because she's not a warm, fuzzy person. And she's not being authentic. She doesn't have a poker face. It's a terrible poker face, quite frankly. Okay? I'm surprised Donald Trump hasn't attacked her on this yet. He's attacked her on almost everything else. He's actually, I think, doing the right things there. And she has this weird jaw thing going, and I think that's her tell. Okay? It's not a poker face, it's a tell, because she is not warm and fuzzy. So, why is this going to help us? Because she's not an authentic person. She's not warm and fuzzy, which means she can't sell the lie to America that she's trying to sell. Okay? She's this tough woman. She wants to tell you in that speech. You'll see when she talks to you about being the prosecutor and she knows people like Donald Trump and knows how to take them on and all these pejoratives she tries and attacks she tries to use about Donald Trump. And, you know, they were worried that Josh Shapiro was going to be too ambitious for her because she is the queen of ambition. She is one big farce. She's all about ambition and the dominoes are going to fall. There is nothing to Kamala Harris. So when J.D. Vance made that comment about a week or so ago about childless cat lady, I think that's going to actually come out and shine. And I think he may have been onto something. Because I watch Kamala Harris and I rewatch and I see it. J.D. Vance might be right. She is a fake and phony person. The childless cat lady syndrome, while that's not the best choice of words still, I think he's going to come out and prove true. Okay? And then there's Tim Walz, and he comes across as fake. I mean, did you not see him come out? He gave Dougie Emhoff big hugs to Dougie, Kamala's husband, if you don't know who that is. And then there's Tim Walz, and he also comes across as fake. This guy, I mean, he comes on stage, he wants to make you think like he's surprised, he's gracious, he's giving Doug Emhoff, Big Dougie, Kamala's husband, he's just hugging him like crazy. And then he sees his wife and he goes to shake her hand. He goes to shake his wife's hand. Where in the world is Al and Tipper Gore? They need to immediately bring them back to the Democratic Party to teach candidate kissing on stage, because clearly nobody kisses on stage better than Tipper and Al Gore. I say bring them back. Because the so-called macho guy that's Minnesota or Midwestern nice that they're going to run as America's uncle, America's dad, can't kiss his own wife, but he gives Doug Emhoff, who goes to the gay cycling class, big hugs. Give me a break, okay? This guy has put tampons in boys' bathrooms, but he can't kiss his wife. Is there anything else we should really have to talk about this guy? I mean, okay, I think we're probably going to be stuck with it. We're going to have to talk about how he raised taxes in Minnesota while taxes were going down elsewhere. And I'm not wasting time about his military record. We get it. The guy's a phony, fake. Okay, I saw General Bergman give an interview on Newsmax addressing it. I'd encourage you to go watch what General Bergman said about it. I thought it was quite insightful, very different from what you're hearing from other veterans and military leaders. But, you know, Kamala gave that rousing speech and introduced him and blah, 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 America's coach and uncle. He comes on stage. He doesn't know how to act, clearly doesn't kiss his wife. And I'm thinking even Mitt Romney and Ann Romney probably kissed on stage. I got to go back and look at that footage. But you know, this guy's on stage and he was so blatantly fake. It was like he intentionally rehearsed how to look gracious and surprised. Okay. Cause I'm talking about body language here and how it's going to haunt this Democrat team. And he tried to look surprised and gracious towards the audience and gracious towards Kamala. And you look at it and you go, he didn't know what to do. Now he got noticed probably the day before, but like everybody else in America found out at 10 a.m. for the 5 p.m. A rally that probably didn't even kick off on time. I watched it after. And so you went 6, 8, 10 hours advance notice. This man had been getting vetted by none other than Barack Obama's hatchet man, the former Attorney General of the United States, Eric Holder, who allowed Border Patrol agents to get killed by the cartels by giving them guns. He gave them guns from America to the cartels, killed Americans. Nobody's held that man accountable. That's how dangerous Eric Holder is. And he vetted this guy. So this guy knew that if Eric Holder's in front of you, asking you questions, making you fill out forms, telling him the size of your underwear, and you're going to act surprised when you're on stage, give me a break. As far as I'm concerned, Tim Walz, this whole Kamala Harris, Tim Walz team gets an F in my book for political theater. They suck. Okay? So here's my final thoughts on what this all means. We're going to deep dive. We're going to continue to deep dive, not just today, by the way, into Mr. Manchurian candidate and groomer who preyed on children. But Tim Walz was the faculty advisor to the Gay Straight Alliance. And this is a man, when you hear about his bathroom policies as governor and what he did in Congress, America is going to be turned off. So I want to bring this all to a head today's episode, because we're probably going to spend 90 days talking about it, or at least as many of those 90 days that I can while I'm busy helping my clients save this country. I don't think you should be depressed, even because it's raining cats and dogs here in South Florida today, and then moving up the coast, as I'm sure some of you are experiencing. But Kamala entered the stage, right? And she claimed, by the way, on Tuesday night, she was the underdog in the race. Hard to call the vice president of the United States an underdog, but Kamala, once again, she's disingenuous, she's a liar, and she wants to call herself the underdog, and like she's fighting for the average American while wearing probably $5,000 Hillary Clinton pantsuits, and she raised $200+ million in what Trump calls the honeymoon phase, and she got Team Obama running the show. Right? And they seem to misunderstand the Hillary Clinton formula, because if America wanted a nice uncle type as vice president, we probably would have Tim Kaine right now, but we don't. We got Tampon Tim. She also is misunderstanding the part that America likes strong alpha males, but they think they got that with Walz. They think they understand America likes alpha males running things, not liars and pretenders and phonies and fakes. And you're probably thinking, Brian, you've been going here longer than you said you would. So there's a mixed message, and I'm not sure I'm getting it. So what are you really getting at? Here's what I'm getting at. Donald Trump was partly right when he said the honeymoon will be over for Kamala. And it will be, because the more, and she's going to get the hype and the media bump and the excitement, and you're going to probably get a little depressed, and you're going to be like, oh my God, we're going to lose. Donald Trump can't pull this off. No, God willing, Donald Trump's going to be president. Kamala has this 90-day runway to make her case, and the media is going to help her. We all know that. So again, it's going to be a little disappointing, but you've got to help America get over the fact that she's might not sit down for an interview, and she's going to let the media sanitize, clean up fake Tim Walz's bio that's been debunked like crazy. The amount of stuff I've read about Tim Walz in the last couple of days and how everything is practically a lie is astonishing. Okay? It might set a record. I mean, there was even some story about him in a contest and drinking horse semen and his stomach being pumped. And I think that's still being debunked a little. But I mean, people were going crazy yesterday about that. But Donald Trump had the opportunity to get a layup. It would have been an easy victory before they threw Biden out. And Team Trump is kind of responsible for some of that. And obviously the progressive, anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, anti-American left. But we could still deliver a victory for Donald Trump. I guess net, that's what I'm saying here. Why? Because Tim and Kamala are fake and phonies. Okay. And they're believing that America's going to hate themselves and their pocketbooks more than they might hate Donald Trump. And so they're hoping Americans hate Donald Trump and get distracted and won't hold their nose and vote for Trump because he's somehow not perfect. He tweets too much. He puts out Truth Social posts that are hurtful, nasty, strong, aggressive, doesn't sound politically correct. But Trump got it right. Okay. And when they call this like Trump reframing the race yesterday and all the crap the media wants to say about it, this wasn't Trump reframing the race and belly aching about the campaign. Trump wanted to deliver the message and steal the limelight. Trump is smart like that. This is why he's more of the tactician than people give him credit for. You see your opponent getting a media bump. Do something to stop it. Why would you give her 5 days of media coverage when you can limit it to 3? Hello, McFly, anybody home? So Trump got it right. He held the press conference. He answered questions. He showed Kamala what leadership looks like, why he's not scared, and he's not scared of debate with the 3 upcoming debates. Don't worry. Who cares if he's on ABC, NBC, Fox? Who cares what station? Donald Trump played by the Joe Biden's queens of whatever rules months ago. You saw what happened. He pummeled him. He'll do it to Kamala. She's fake and phony, and it's all going to come out. Because Trump is right. America's going to vote on its stomach. America can't afford the food it would like to eat, let alone the food it is eating, and it's going to vote on its stomach. And he's counting on that. Okay? He's counting on the shiny veneer of Kamala and Tampon Tim wearing off. Tim thinks that she brought the joy back and they're mesmerizing and the progressives are happy. But guess what? America hasn't heard what you heard on this episode. America hasn't heard what you heard anywhere else about these people. And they're going to hear Kamala. And she's going to do what she did in the speech the other day. She's going to talk about her priorities, her policies, okay? And America needs to hear over and over again Kamala talk about affordable housing, affordable childcare, affordable healthcare, paid leave, broad-based economy, build wealth. But guess what? You can't do that with socialist policies because socialist policies cost millions and billions and trillions. Okay? And she wants the quote unquote freedom to keep us safe from gun violence. But she refused to call for supporting and funding local police. She called for defunding them. She called for bailing out criminals. Okay? So you can't go to America and say, oh, I'm going to make everything better. I'm going to lower the cost for American families, quote unquote, without telling them the truth that she's going to subsidize it by Robin Hood economic policies. And that's what you got to remind your friends and family. Donald Trump is right. If you can't do the bread and butter issues without stealing from other Americans, nothing else is going to matter. All that excitement. Yeah, college kids, they get excited. They vote for the new shiny, oh, Kamala Harris. Let's vote for the 60-year-old lady because she's with it versus the 80-year-old guy, 78-year-old guy, whatever he is. Okay, who cares? Guess what? At the end of the day, you got to eat. You got to stay safe. You got to be able to actually walk to the supermarket and then be able to afford what's there. And Kamala's policies, her so-called version of a broad-based economy, is Robin Hood economic theory. And her running mate is obviously well on board with that because he took something like 30 trips. He did like a wedding and a honeymoon, and he taught in China. And then he's the Gay Straight Alliance faculty advisor, and he's putting tampons in them. I mean, do you really think men in America, they weren't voting for Kamala? They knew that. So they brought this guy with a military record, supposedly being alpha male and hunting, and somehow they're going to convince you that they got that alpha male on the ticket when in fact he's Minnesota weird? No, even Bernie Sanders isn't that weird. And that's why they're not going to win the man vote either. Okay? So we need to keep telling, if you want to rally the Republicans, save this country, you, me, need to keep telling the Harris and Walz stories. It is literally going to be that easy. Do not overcomplicate it. Sometimes keeping things simple is the best policy, and it is here. After all, keep it simple, stupid. The KISS method, something Tim Walz won't know about mentally or physically. Apparently doesn't kiss women, only boys. Who knows? I think that's probably going to come out, even whether it's horses. We'll find out if that story's true. But logical, sane Americans are going to hear the Harris and Walz stories, and they're not voting for them because Donald Trump said it right. They're going to vote for the stomachs. Okay? And that's what's going to happen, and it's got to be that simple. So we can't be baited by the media wants to push us off message, like when they try to ask Donald Trump about abortion yesterday, and he says, I'll have another press conference about that. So now you got to go back and hear it, and Donald Trump didn't screw up. And he showed leadership, and he showed other candidates down ballot how to handle it. And they need to take notes of that, because that's how we're going to save this country. Because most of the National Democratic Party wants to promote this anti-sexist Harris-Walz style socialism, and pockets of America are guaranteed to reject it. Just like they finally woke up and rejected Jamal Bowman, and they rejected Cori Bush the other day. Okay, now that may not happen in every congressional district and seat. And that's why what I said earlier in this episode is so important about having the candidates who stick to the message that resonates with the actual district, the people, the voters, the taxpayers in a district, and not people who just cling to MAGA. We've got to have people with brains who know how to talk to the voters about the issues they care about and win a general election. So we got work to do. It will be this easy if we stick to this formula. And oftentimes it is difficult for people in politics to realize that campaigns can actually be won and lost by sticking to a plan. You plan your work and you work your plan. And no matter what, we have to stick to the message. We have to stick to the formula. The winning formula in 2024 is border security, fighting inflation, strengthening the economy, protecting our children, protecting our country, and doing away with things like people who think boys' bathrooms should have tampons. So that's what I have to say today. I thank you for listening. I thank you for being one of the great Americans who understands that Tim Walz and Kamala Harris are as dangerous a ticket as could be. I thank you for being the kind of person who cares enough to listen, to send me your feedback at rallyfortherepublic.com, feedback at rallyfortherepublic.com, staying engaged in the process and sharing this with others. I'm going to have some great interviews coming up in the next few episodes, so I hope you're going to listen to them as well. And I will do my best over these next 90 days to give you my insights as a political consultant to what's going on in this country and how our candidates are acting. Thank you, and God bless America.
Thank you for joining us on Rally for the Republic, where we are fighting for America's future. Visit 1776coalition.com. Rally for the Republic podcast is available on Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and Google Podcasts. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and download. Join Bryan Rudnick next time as we continue to fight for the American way of life and challenge the hypocrisy. This is Rally for the Republic.